When you was a kid, or even if you are one, did you ever have that game you was just obsessed with? I remember getting Sonic 3 and Knuckles for the Wii's Virtual Console and just being hooked. All I could think about whilst I was at school was just wanting to go home and play more of it. I understand now as an outlier, most other kids my age were more interested in playing Call of Duty or Counter-Strike. And how can we forget Minecraft? Anybody else have those servers you'd go on with your friends? And then you'd spend the entire next day at school just thinking about what you was going to do when you got home back on the server. You ever actually do anything you guys ever planned? Yeah, no one did. But we're not here to talk about any of those games. We're here to talk about one game in particular that, during my formative years, I was borderline obsessed with. Howdy folks, and welcome to Five Nights at Freddy's, a game that, if you've clicked on this video, probably doesn't need that much of an introduction. It's the indie horror classic that often feels weird calling it indie still, with how in about 10 years it's grown into about 15 games, 5 decades of unsolvable story, over 50 books, and soon to be an entire movie trilogy. I have done substantially less in the same amount of time, and I don't feel great about it. But we're not here to talk about all of that either. Let's forget all the modern fluff that's been added. I want to look back at the original, those first 5 nights at Freddy's. It's almost embarrassing to admit how into this game I was as a kid. You couldn't talk to me in 2014 without me bringing this up in some way. Why is that though? Well, I could just say I like the game, but if you look at the video length, I kinda got a bit more to say about it. Why do I like this game? And just in general, what did this game do to do so well? Now, on this channel, I want to explain the games what mean the most to me, even though I realise that most of those games are going to lean on the niche side. Not everyone's going to know about them. So the way I want to structure those videos is explaining those games as if the people watching don't know these games, right? However, it's weird here because I feel like most of you watching are probably fully aware of Five Nights at Freddy's. Heck, I've been a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's basically since the beginning. So it's almost second nature to assume certain things about this franchise. Heck, if you're watching this, you probably know what the first game's about and what the story is. However, I think in getting used to certain things, we almost forget the littler details and their impact within a game, and the experience of playing it for the first time. So for this retrospective, I'm going to almost try and forget everything I know about Five Nights at Freddy's. Go in with a clean slate, assume nothing. So, on the off chance you don't know anything about Five Nights at Freddy's, maybe this video can help explain everything there is to know. So, what is Five Nights at Freddy's? Well, in purely simplistic terms, it's a point-and-click, sit-and-survive style horror game. You're stuck in a single room and you have to keep evil things out of your room for about 9 minutes and boom, that's a level. If you know what you're doing, you can beat the main game in about an hour. But obviously, there's gotta be like way more to that, right? You don't just get like 35,000 positive Steam reviews for nothing. Well, if you're interested in revisiting a vintage pizzeria with a fresh pair of eyes, join me and my pals as we start the timer on a mechanical masterpiece. Well, it makes sense to start on arguably one of the most overlooked parts of this game, the title screen. It's easy to ignore a title screen when comparing it to the rest of the experience, but a title screen is a game's first impression, especially for a game of this type where once you click start you get thrown right into the deep end straight away. The title screen has to act as the warm-up in a way, get you ready for what you're about to experience. And, at least to me, I think it works. The sudden harsh static the second it loads in, the music that almost feels like you're watching a grim drama or a crime scene, the crunchy sound effects when you hover over the start game button. And that's all before you look to the right and see this guy. Considering the title, this must be Freddy. And what an intense first impression this character leaves. Seriously, think about it. On a title screen, with no words or text or anything, he just stares. Twitching, holding back. Most of him is shrouded in darkness. The only thing glaring out are his white eyes. Is he staring at you? You can't tell. You notice the eyebrows and teeth, but no emotion in his face. What is he thinking? What even is he? Well, I've spent enough time rambling about a title screen, but you see my point already, I hope. The game establishes a tone from the literal second you load it up. Let's see how long we can keep it up. Here we go, finally, some story. Pressing new game shows you a newspaper article for a job application as a security guard at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The not responsible for injury or dismemberment is a little worrying, but hey, considering how bad it is to find a job in the present day, I'd have probably given this a shot as well. Also, here's a cute little detail. The newspaper has a circle around it. Like, the person who got this job, I guess the person we're playing as, specifically chose this job. Like, they were skimming through the newspaper and saw this one with dismemberment and injury and thought, yep, that one's a bit of me. It's just a fun little detail, isn't it? Now, I know I said I'm jumping into this one semi-blind, but considering this game is readily available on Steam, with screenshots and a trailer easy to view, it's fair to assume that, at least up until this point, the player has at least some idea of the main point of this game. The game takes place in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a place like Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz Pizza Place. A place where they serve pizza, have arcades, and an animatronic band of characters that perform for children. And here we are, in our security office. Now, for most games, being thrown straight into the deep end might feel a little overwhelming. But here's how Five Nights at Freddy's gets around it.
Hello? Hello?
The phone guy! Now, the worst way you can explain a game is specifically pausing and be told specifically, hey, you need to jump over this gap else you'll fall. Like, there's so many other ways you can teach a player without just full on telling them. What's interesting with the phone guy is that although he is telling you how to play, the way he tells you is woven into the gameplay and story itself. He's not just a tutorial, he's a character who was the previous security guard before you. In fact, he's recording these messages as he's finishing his last week. Well, considering you're listening to them, that already means he's finished his last week. It's interesting how in the span of about 15 seconds, you feel like you have someone who's there to help you, only to realise he's already left. You might have these recordings to teach you how to play, but that doesn't mean you're any less alone. Another interesting thing about the phone guy is that although he is the game's tutorial, he doesn't really tell you how to play, at least straight away. Like I mentioned, he's a character, a person who's worked in that exact office you're in. In universe, his job isn't to tell you how to play, it's to establish that you are a happy employee at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Whilst he's explaining the company jargon to you that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is a place for kids and grown-ups alike, the game allows the player to almost experiment and find out the game for themselves. Like, think about this for a moment. I don't think it would have been that out of place if, when you started the game, you just see a text box pop up and say, this pulls up your cameras, this is your power, don't let it run out. In video games, it's so easy to forget the importance of how we teach players how to, well, play your game. Just simply telling literally the player how to play the game crumbles the immersion. Instead though, this game throws you in with, at this point, a relatively useless tutorial. Whilst he's rambling, it gives the player ample time to explore their surroundings of the room they're in, and find most of the things out for themselves. It'll be natural for the player to move their mouse around and look around their office. They'll find that on each side of their office they'd have a light and door button. Although at this point in the game the player would have no reason to use these buttons, this being a safe enough environment allows the player to experiment and find out what these buttons do. One obviously lighting up the hallway and the other closing a door. Doing either of those lights up the power usage bar, which will draw the player's attention to the bottom of the screen, where they notice they have limited power and using the doors and lights use it up. Again, at this point the phone guy has mentioned nothing about power, doors or lights. This is all just the tools the game shows you and gives you the time and space to grow accustomed to in your own time. You might be rolling your eyes at how obvious I'm bringing this up, but it's really important to remember that at the time of Five Nights at Freddy's releasing, there wasn't really a game like it. This is what I meant by taking things for granted. Because we already know the games in hindsight, we forget how well the game is designed to actually teach you the most fundamental basics of playing it. But anyway, back to Phone Guy. At this point, he's just talking about the animatronic characters. I guess as the security guard, it's our job to protect them, right? Well, with the final button being at the bottom of our screen, there's no reason not to check it out, right? Oh, wow, well, I guess these are the characters. It was kind of hard to notice all the details in Freddy on the title screen, but you'd assume he's here. No idea who these two are though. This is our camera system. It shows us a complete layout of the pizzeria and allows us to view all of the different cameras by clicking on them. Except the kitchen. That one's out. Just like the office, in this safe environment, it's completely natural for the player to explore this camera system, get accustomed to the place you're going to be guarding. Each camera is really dense and dark. There's so many little details, like the spare mascot heads in the backstage, posters and children's drawings all across the walls, little pizzas in the restrooms, the musk and grime all over the walls. It really feels lived in. worn out. Like this place is clearly loved by kids. There's just no adult running the place who really gives it much care. Now, whilst the player is getting accustomed to their surroundings, we allow the phone guy to continue talking to us. He even has this little introductory greeting from the company he's meant to read for us. It's mostly a formality letting us know that the company isn't responsible for damage for property or person. Again, a little harsh, but we saw that in the newspaper, so nothing too bad. He even goes on to explain,
Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced. Blah, blah, blah.
That's slightly more worrying. Why would there be damage or death? Surely no one's interested in breaking in and stealing anything from this place, right? And here is where one of FNAF's greatest strengths lies. Worry. Because of the appearance and gameplay, the game builds up some impressive immersion. Again, the tutorial is just a person on the phone to you, and because we don't see the person we're playing as, it's easy to imprint ourselves onto them. And since the gameplay is from our point of view, we almost feel like we're the ones in this situation. We're the night guard. So hearing that, ugh. If we had a real company say something to the extent of that on your first day, you would be freaking out. So being invested in this game where we are in that situation, it immediately establishes panic and begs the question I already asked. Why would damage or death happen? Don't forget, we've already noticed the heavy metal doors. What are they there for? Who are they there for? Why are they there for? No. Well, the phone guy doesn't stop there. He explains,
The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night, but do I blame them? No. So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long.
We're not here to guard the animatronics. We have to survive against the animatronics. Which, to be entirely honest, doesn't actually sound that bad. The phone guy said all they do is wander a bit, so what's so scary about that?
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day, too. But then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
The frontal... what? Just like that, the situation gets real. Despite being just animatronics that can walk, you are now told that they somehow possess enough power to literally remove the frontal lobe off a human. Fun fact! The skull is not a weak bone. Protecting the brain is pretty important. So the fact that these characters can just bite through it, like I said, it establishes worry. He doesn't stop there though.
Now concerning your safety.
I need to interject again. His attitude thus far has been very blasé, almost as if he's sugarcoating everything he's saying as if there isn't anything to worry about. He wasn't worried about explaining that if we died, the place would simply hide our bodies, and he didn't care about the bite of 87. So the fact that he's now showing concern for our safety, again, it establishes that our safety is a genuine priority now. Stakes have been raised.
The only real risk to you as a night watchman here, if any, is the fact that these characters, if they happen to see you after hours, probably won't recognize you as a person. They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on. Now, since that's against the rules here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if the suits themselves weren't filled with cross beams, wires, and animatronic devices, especially around the facial area. So you can imagine how having your head forcefully pressed inside one of those could cause a bit of discomfort and death. The only parts of you that would likely see the light of day again would be your eyeballs and teeth when they pop out the front of the mask. Yeah, they don't tell you these things when you sign up.
Now, I know I've rambled and interjected a handful of times in this, but if this is actually your first time playing, you're about 3 to 4 minutes in. Not even 5 minutes into playing the game, and the game's allowed you to explore your surroundings, find out what input on the tools you have in those surroundings, and you've just listened to a guy explain to you all the reasons you need to use those tools. The game's also explained some relatively in-depth world building with the bite of 87 and how the company reacts to death or injury. The blasé nature of the phone guy implies that this isn't his first time death has happened. And at the end, he reconfirms all those tools you learnt whilst he was talking. He reconfirms to use those doors when necessary and to conserve power before he leaves, letting you get ready to play the rest of the first night on your own. All of that in under 5 minutes. Now, you might think, if anything, the player is bombarded with information. Would that not overwhelm the player? And yes, you're absolutely right. But I think that was the point here. Again, the structure of the phone guy was to constantly throw information at you, most of which related to death or injury. The way he spoke and moved from topic to topic sounded like he wanted to sweep all the problems under the rug, ironically the same way the rest of the company would treat death. The game wanted you to get caught on the little details of his dialogue, and since it's a pre-recorded message, there's no way to pause. Whilst you're getting caught up on the bite of 87, he's already started to explain how they'll stuff you in a suit and kill you. The only time he does slow down is when he's telling you the very specifically important information about the gameplay, closing the doors and the power. The fact that he is talking as if there's really nothing to worry about gives the impression that although he's here to help you, it might be for the better of the company not having to clean up your corpse than your actual well-being. At this point, we know the company doesn't care about death. Although Phone Guy rushed through it, he literally said they'd only file a missing persons report basically after they've removed all evidence of you being there. The way the Phone Guy speaks about it, as if he's all used to these things that have happened here, really feels like he's been at the company for a long time. He's finishing his last week whilst recording your messages, so he could be retiring. Listening in, you feel like an outsider, on your own. He's here to help you, but you don't know him. You don't know what he knows. There's that specific disconnect that works great in horror, the feeling of loneliness. Of course, you're not really alone. When the phone guy hangs up, there's almost this suspense. Again, realistically, you've seen the trailers, you've now been told in-game that they do move, you're almost waiting for them to. The game is full of background noises that clutter your ears, which is great because you can almost can't tell what's a random noise and what's a noise you should be worried about. The show stage is such a great camera to focus on as well. All 3 characters fill up the entire camera, and checking on them, your mind will get accustomed to what the show stage looks like with all 3 of them there. So by the time you hear a random noise and you check the cameras to see what it was, alarm bells ring in your mind as you immediately establish that there's a gap on the stage. Someone isn't there. You'll panic as you check through the cameras looking for where the character could be. The reality of the situation sets in. You've been told that the characters walk around, but actually seeing it is a whole experience in and of itself. It's also creepy just looking back on the stage, the way that other characters haven't moved. It really gives that feeling of robotic, you know? No conscious decision was made here. If these had any thought, they would have likely reacted to one of them moving away. But the fact that they stay exactly still, it gives that true feeling that they're not aware of each other. Which, obviously, why would they be? They're just robots. It really drives that point home that, although dangerous, they're not villainous. They're just programmed to they follow their strict rules. It does not make them any less creepy, though. You can stop looking at me now. And that's most of the gameplay, really. You check the cameras and watch as the characters move around the building. All you really need to know is the characters move based on RNG, randomness. So depending on your luck, you could be watching the characters slowly wander the building, slowly getting closer and closer to your office, or they might not move from the stage at all. Or if you're really unlucky, they'll just make a beeline straight to your office. There is a merit for a game that does allow some level of chaos. It allows unpredictability. When looking at these characters, you really have no idea when they're about to move. But like I said, although uncommon, it does create the possibility for severely unlucky games to happen and allow unfair game overs. And also, the game doesn't actually give you the names of these characters, other than Freddy, which you'd have already gathered from the title screen anyway. He's the only character Phone Guy mentions by name as well. You only find out their actual names when you've already completed the game, so to save us some time, I'll just let you guys know that the characters on stage with Freddy are Bonnie the Bunny and Chica the Chicken. Don't ask why a chicken has teeth, science hasn't come back on that one yet. Now, if it's your first time playing, obviously you'll want to keep a close eye on Bonnie and Chica. They're the only ones who appear to be moving right now. Because both characters have different rooms they move around in, Bonnie typically moving to rooms on the left side and Chica moving to the rooms on the right, it creates this frantic clicking between cameras to find them. It's so easy to lose track of one of them, and whilst you're spending time finding them again, you've lost track of where the other one went. It creates this constant fear and panic. You're in a building with robots that will kill you if they see you, and you have no idea where they are half the time. Which creates another intense, common moment for most third-time players. Since you'll be on the cameras looking for them, you'll be using up a lot of power. Again, if it's your first time playing, you'll be scared. You're gonna be wasting power just looking at the cameras, watching to make sure you don't lose the characters. Heck, it's entirely normal you'll be closing doors without anyone actually being there, just out of fear of what if there's someone there, you know? It's a common trap the game almost wants you to fall into. You're not just surviving against the animatronics, you're against the system as well. Despite Night 1 being the easiest, it's arguably the most panic-inducing, simply because you've been given so many different variables to keep track of, and you have no idea how to really deal with them yet. Which, funnily enough, is how I describe starting, well, any new job, really. And just like a real job, just as you're celebrating having completed your first shift, the relief that you managed to not die, you're thrown right into your next shift, Night 2. Well, this now explains the name of the game, Five Nights at Freddy's. It's interesting how arcade-like the game really is when you think about it. Just like old arcade games, there's only really one level. It just gets harder each time. So, what's new in Night 2? Buzz? Well, we get another phone message. Turns out he wanted to leave us several.
Hello? Hello? Well, if you're hearing this and you made it to day 2, congrats.
Again, the way he worded that really feels like he had no idea whether we made it or not. It really adds to that fear factor. Someone who's been working here a long time sincerely doesn't know whether we're alive or not. Again, it adds weight to the fact that we can die here. What I like about this phone call is, whilst the Night 1 was mostly about just introducing us to the world and letting us explore and how to play for ourselves, with only really the final sentence actually telling us how to play, which makes sense because on Night 1, realistically, none of the characters are going to be moving whilst the phone guy was talking anyway. However, here, on Night 2, the characters are active as soon as the night starts, so he has to tell the player to check the cameras. He even mentions that the characters become more active as the week progresses, something that shouldn't make sense. Like, is it because the place is closed on weekends, so they don't move around and get all stiff by the time Monday rolls around? But the reason they start moving during the night is to stop their servos from locking up, so they'll be moving around the weekend anyway, right? It's a tiny nitpick, so whatever. It's just the game's way of explaining the game gets harder the more you play. No duh. I guess that also means Night 1 takes place on a Monday? Or a Sunday, depending on what you'd consider the start of the week? Huh. Again, fun little detail. He also mentions that Freddy himself doesn't come off stage very often, which reconfirms what the player was noticing, because in Night 1 only Bonnie and Chica moved. The wording's a little weird though for the next part.
Freddy himself doesn't come off stage very often. I've heard he becomes a lot more active in the dark though.
First of all, the phone guy heard it, not noticed for himself. Again, he's rather hiding the horrors under the rug, or there's really been people who've worked here and complained about the safety of this job. The weird wording gets worse though, because Freddy gets more active in the dark. It's nighttime. I mentioned that all the cameras were really dark earlier, and it makes sense, because this building probably doesn't have that many windows, so it would get pretty dark at night. So why ain't Freddy moving? I guess it's just not dark enough? Again, it's just a weird thing to mention. Phone Guy also explains specifically how to play the game now. Again, Night 1 allows you to discover these tools and lets you get a basic understanding on how they work, but realistically during Night 1, since Bonnie and Chica move so slow, you probably hadn't had much of a chance to actually use them in practice. Since Night 2 already starts them off active, it's good to get told a more in-depth guide on how to use your door lights and doors. So I guess I'll quickly explain as well. As I mentioned, Bonnie and Chica move from room to room in the building, occasionally getting closer to your office. Again, Bonnie targeting your left side, Chica targeting your right. When they get to their respective hallway corner, their next movement might be towards your office. They make their way to your blind spots. That's what these are called, the little view spots right by your office. The only way to know if they are at your blind spots for sure is to use your lights. And if they are, you gotta close the door. Again, great sound design, especially for a new player. The idea of there being a robot just waiting for you in the dark, you have no way of knowing, and the sound effect when there is one just sinks the dread in. It's been over 10 years since I've first heard it, and it still just instinctively makes my heart sink. That is basically it. You just close the door and wait for them to leave. You can still use the lights even when the door is closed to check if they are still there. Chica is obvious because she appears in your window. Bonnie, you can see his... I have no idea what that is. Like, to this day, I've, like, no idea. But it leaves when Bonnie does, so that's a sign that you can, you can open the door again. And that's basically all Night 2 adds. At this point, you just finished Night 1, and now you're getting slightly more comfortable with the gameplay. It lets you actually test yourself with it. I say comfortable. You've been dreading the idea of robots killing you, now you actually get to defend yourself from them. I guess we can just skip to Night 3.
Also, check on the curtain in Pirate Cove from time to time. The character in there seems unique in that he becomes more active if the cameras remain off for long periods of time. I guess he doesn't like being watched.
Pirate's Cove? Oh yeah, despite being on the left side, Bonnie never visits this camera, so I never had a reason to check it. It says out of order. I just assumed there was nothing there, but I guess the animatronic that's out of order is still just there. So, like the phone guy said, this character doesn't work like Bonnie and Chica. This guy won't wander around until he gets to your door. This character will slowly emerge from his cove. If you leave the camera off for too long, he'll emerge more and more until he leaves. Where did he go? You'll check through all the cameras, seeing where he is, until you get to the left hallway and... that was Foxy. And boy, what an introduction! Back in the day, this character was an instant fan favourite, and it's easy to see why. He's the underdog, being on his own stage and out of order. Unlike Bonnie and Chica, he's missing parts of his animatronic suit, which does look cool. And I'm sure you noticed his eye-patched and hook. He's only a mother-loving pirate! He's like the Shadow the Hedgehog here. Like, if you're cool, Foxy's your favourite. Also, do you remember when I was talking about Chica and Bonnie, and I just said that when you close the doors, they'll just naturally leave? I explained that kind of boringly, right? Because it is. Despite all the tension building up as they slowly make their way to you, once they get there, they do just kind of leave after a little bit. It's a little anticlimactic, which, to be fair, isn't much of a criticism because they're not meant to be malicious, they're just robots. Foxy, though, he runs down the hallway, and if you got the door closes, he bangs on it. There's aggression there, and it's terrifying. There's at least some confirmation that despite just being robots, there's some animalistic tendencies to them. Foxy wanted to get in, and that's a dreadful feeling. Like, maybe they're not fully randomly roaming. Maybe the rest want to get in too. Now, again, I know I'm rambling throughout it all, but in a normal game of Five Nights at Freddy's, at this point you'll probably be about halfway through Night 2. And think about this, when have you sincerely had a moment to relax? You have the first night explaining that these robots can not only bite through your head, but will also stuff you into a mechanical suit that will kill you. Fun. You spend the first night panicking and checking the cameras, watching these robots slowly make their way to your room, with no idea how to really defend yourself. You then make your way on to Night 2, where the characters are now way more active, and you now have a third character that literally runs towards you, and you have to manage all of this whilst making sure you don't run out of power. I think this is one of the main reasons Five Nights at Freddy's works so well at being a horror game for newcomers. You're really never given any time to breathe. The only time you feel genuinely safe in this game is when you have both doors down. But even then, you can't have them closed for too long because you'll run out of power, especially with Foxy being introduced. Now, given the way the phone guy explains he doesn't like being watched, most people thought that you had to focus on Foxy specifically. That's not entirely the case. Just checking the cameras in general will slow him down, but given the nature of how the phone guy works, there's no real way to rewind or really take in that much information. Which, again, isn't a criticism, it's just a drawback of having the tutorial be a one-time audio, you know? It's entirely normal for a player to be checking Foxy regardless, though. Again, you want to know how far he's gotten out of this cove. You also want to be keeping a close eye on where Bonnie and Chica are. Again, if Night 1 is just a pure panic mode as you try to understand everything, Night 2 wait until you've understood just enough of the game to once again increase the difficulty and keep that tension up. I say Night 1 is where you'll be panicking the most, but realistically it covers the first two nights. Especially since Night 2 starts automatically right after the first one. You're literally given no time to just relax. Oh dear. Well, it had to have happened sooner or later. The power outage. You thought this place was dark before, now you can barely see around you. You can still hear the sound effects of the animatronics moving though. By all means, just because you can no longer see them, doesn't mean they're not there. Except Bonnie, Chica, not even Foxy gets you when the power's out. As we were previously told, there's a special character that becomes more active in the dark. Freddy Fazbear himself. No doors, no cameras, just you and a giant robotic bear playing you a song. Again, it really drives the idea that these robots are made for entertaining children. They're equipped with music boxes. It's almost like he's taunting us. He knows we have no way to defend ourselves anymore. The timer in the top right is gone as well. There's no confirmation whether or not we'll survive. Just like the other characters, Freddy's music box is also based in randomness. He can stop and attack us at any time. We are simply at his mercy. Well, that was close. It's interesting how the power out is implemented. Realistically, you are more likely to have run out of power nearer the end of the night. Again, given the character's randomness, most of the time it might not even be down to poor play. You could just have Bonnie make his way to your office one too many times. Just like most things in the game, it creates this panic, this nail-biting tension. You can't see the clock, but you know you must have been close to finishing the night, so it feels so rewarding to just have scraped through by the skin of your teeth. Just like the character's movements though, allowing randomness to fully decide your outcome isn't always great. So from my understanding, he basically has 3 random times here. When the power first runs out, it's random on how long he takes to actually get to your doorway, then it's random how long he'll play his song, and when he stops his song, it's fully random when he actually gets you. That's 3 layers of randomness that, again, could grant players a free ticket to surviving the night, or just give them a game over the moment they run out of power. It's not a perfect system, but you can't deny the tension it creates and relief when you finally do manage to survive one. Well, the relief doesn't last too long. We're thrown right back in. Night 3. We get another phone call.
Hello. Hey, you're doing great. Most people don't last this long. I mean, you know, they usually move on to other things by now. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant.
Well, that's reassuring. This call doesn't really mention any new concepts. Phone guy says things start getting real tonight, so you can expect it's going to be just more of a test of using the skills you learnt the previous 2 nights. He does mention something I find weirdly interesting though.
Hey listen, I had an idea. If you happen to get caught and want to avoid getting stuffed into a Freddy suit, try playing dead. You know, go limp. Then there's a chance that maybe they'll think that you're an empty costume instead. Then again, if they think you're an empty costume, they might try to stuff a metal skeleton into you. I wonder how that would work. Yeah, never mind. Scratch that. It's best just not to get caught.
Now, that's basically all the Night 3 call is, phone guy saying this. Now, obviously it's not confirmed, but I guess the phone guy is recording these whilst he's currently working the night shift himself. I guess that would also explain his demeanour a little bit. He does talk as if he's a little preoccupied. Whilst he's telling you how to survive, he's also trying to survive against these guys himself. The way he explained all of that, it gives this impression that he's thinking of ways he could survive. He might not be as calm as his voice lets on. He might be as worried as we are. I think the way he offers this idea as well, he doesn't sound sure, does he? He's not entirely sure if going limp would make them think you're an empty costume. Which, side tangent, looking in the back room you can clearly see the mascot heads, and just looking at the characters, they are not wearing limp costumes like fabric. These look like fiberglass casings that are firm. So it's weird the phone guy would think about costumes when these characters clearly don't wear the same type of costumes he's describing. But anyway, my point. Him not being sure if they would see us as a costume implies that maybe he's not even sure that they see us as an endoskeleton. Which for the record is an interesting point, right? Why would an animatronic see us as an endoskeleton? And think about that for a second. Animatronics see us. A robot scanning its surroundings to not bump into things is one thing, but real vision. These animatronic eyes that are very clearly glossy and glass can see and have enough of image recognition to understand what an endoskeleton is? Sorry, my actual point, I don't think the phone guy or the company really knows why the animatronics are stuffing people into suits. In fact, Foxy doesn't have a full suit on. Why are the animatronics aggroing on him? We even see a spare endoskeleton in the back. Bonnie gets in very close proximity to said endo. Why isn't he putting a suit on him, if that's the rules? Although this phone call might just seem like a random filler because there's nothing more to teach the player, I think it introduces some more subtle world building that, although the company is aware these robots are hostile and stuff people into suits, they're not actually certain why. Almost as if them thinking you're a naked endoskeleton is just the best explanation they could come up with. It makes you think what else isn't exactly what they say. Is there really a night mode in these animatronics to stop their servos from locking up? Or are these robots just moving and they have no explanation why? I understand I'm likely overthinking the Night 3 phone call, but the points I brought up, like Foxy and the backstage endo, are still true, and I feel like they're obvious enough that a regular player would notice them in a playthrough. It just doesn't make sense. Now, since Night 3 doesn't really add anything mechanically, I want to mention the Easter eggs, what can best be described as hallucinations. They're pretty rare, but when checking on some cameras, there's a chance they'll be different. The right hallway, instead of showing the regular posters, will sometimes show these weird crying faces, or just say "it's me" over and over again. The Freddy poster in the left corner will show, well, whatever the heck that is. The out of order sign will sometimes say "it's me" as well. It's me. It's a phrase that gets used a lot in this game. Sometimes without even checking the cameras, you'll just have these random, I guess, panic attacks where you'll see animatronic faces along with the phrase "it's me." Again, for a game that's already constantly overwhelming you, getting these right in your face always makes you panic a little. Especially when realistically, you don't know if you've done something wrong. Again, Night 2 randomly introduces Foxy. You don't know if seeing these randomly means another character is hiding away somewhere. Also, I assume these are hallucinations. I doubt the animatronics are literally taking down the posters and putting up new ones. It really adds to the feeling of the person who we're playing as, us, are sincerely stressed out here. It's obvious when I say it out loud, but this is a night shift. I feel like pulling this many all-nighters in a row would cause some mental effects to happen, let alone when the job involves you literally surviving gruesome death. I wonder what the "it's me" implies though. Is it a literal "it's me" as in all of these thoughts are just all in my head? The game never really tells you. The game does ramp up difficulty as well. Phone Guy wasn't kidding when he says things start to get real. I know in Night 2 I hyped up Foxy as this speed demon who'll catch you when you're not looking, but realistically Night 2 is still a very easy night, even when you don't fully know what you're doing. And even acting as if I'm new to this game, although more difficult, Night 3 isn't anything crazy. I can't imagine that many newcomers really struggling up until this point. Well, that can't be good. Sometimes your door and lights will just jam. You have no way of knowing who's outside. It's natural to panic if this happens, of course. You'll flip up the camera looking for the characters to make sure they're not by your door, and then you'll hear it. You feel that? That's dread. You're looking around the cameras. Chica isn't anywhere to be found. You're panicking. You know the door was the only thing holding her back, and without it, and you can't see her anywhere, the raspy noises from behind your monitor confirm the worst in your mind. It's too late, isn't it? There's two outcomes. You either take down your monitor in panic, or you keep it up. You don't know for certain if there's anyone behind that monitor, but you don't want to face whatever it is, if there is. Sadly, even if you do keep it up, whatever is behind it will only wait so long before forcing it down. Game over. Now, I know jump scares are seen as pretty cheap in a horror game. It's a way to surprise a player and trick them into thinking they're more scared than they actually are. But I think Five Nights at Freddy's handles them great. I know I've been describing the game pretty technically for the most part. I've explained how the characters move and how you survive against them, but I've not really touched on how the player is literally thinking in these moments, especially if it's their first time playing. Now, I was fairly young at the time, but this game released in 2014, and from what I remember, most horror games released in this time were rather more action-y, revolving around how you actually neutralise the threats, like in Resident Evil, or more passive-based, where you most had to focus on certain actions like puzzles or exploration, with the horror being mostly the thing that's best avoided, like by being stealthy and not letting the horror see you, like Amnesia, Silent Hill, or even the classic Slender Man. And that's ignoring the immense amount of point-and-click horrors like The Deep Sleep or The House. God, the amount of nightmares this game gave me, man. I would say let me know if you want me to do a video on this, but I don't think I'm able to reopen that wound anytime soon. Most point-and-click horrors rarely involved a horror monster chasing you or anything, and death was more of just a you clicking the wrong thing. The same with RPG Maker horror games, probably my favourite subgenre of horror, especially in games like Miss I.O. I remember specifically interacting with the wrong thing, and 9 times out of 10 it would end up killing you. And take Eve, one of my favourite games of all time. Most of the deaths come from simply just making the wrong decision. You do get chased by monsters occasionally, and the best way of surviving is simply just, well, walking around them. Eve was actually my first video essay I did, so if you're liking this video, it'd mean a lot if you want to give that video a go as well. Anyway, Now, I've just mentioned a lot of different horror games here, but do you know what they all have in common? Looking at them all side by side, you can move. No matter what terrors hide behind the corner, you can always turn the other way and avoid them, or run away if they see you, which, creates tense moments in itself, but my point here is you actively control the character you are playing as. Five Nights at Freddy's places you in a room with no way to leave. Think about that for a second. Again, every previous game I showed allowed some movability. Five Nights at Freddy's has none. There's no, you have to just solve a puzzle whilst avoiding the horror, or shooting the horror before moving on. You are helpless. Sincerely, truly helpless. Your only defense are a set of doors that don't really stop them. It simply delays them until they try again later, and they'll always try again later. The security cameras allow this truly interesting gameplay dynamic of you allowing yourself to actually see the horrors and watch them make their way through around this environment. All you can do is watch them get closer and closer to you. Instead of you exploring an environment and finding the horrors, you find the horrors the second you boot up the cameras, and you watch them make their way to you. It's such an interesting gameplay idea. And the constant tension of watching these horrors make their way to you, and the game explaining what will happen if they get to you, there's this constant pressure of death looming over you. You know what will happen if they get you. You will die. All of this juxtaposed to the happy sound effects in the background, reminding you that this place is meant to be for kids. You'll hear the robots singing, random songs playing, all whilst you're also hearing their heavy footsteps, the cold air whishing through the building, the lighting being just dark enough for you to second guess seeing something there, your office having true blind spots where you can't see anyone in that darkness, but if there is someone there, they can see you and they want to get in. The heavy sound design mixed with the constant stress of watching these creatures all piling up to one inevitable slip up where you let one get in and boom! All of that tension climaxes with a scream, up close and personal with the very creatures you are watching get close to you. It's a gruesome scream as well. I understand it's easy to dunk on YouTubers when this game first came out, saying that people just overreact to this game and it isn't that scary. And I can't say who and who wasn't overreacting for the sake of a video, but you can't deny, even as an adult, maybe you wouldn't throw yourself off your chair, but you can still understand the panic and the oh crap nature this game forces on you, and the jump scare that follows when you do mess up. And with a jump scare, the jump quickly fades away. But I think, since this game puts so much emphasis on what would happen when you get caught, you're almost still a little scared on what's to come. You know them finding you isn't their end goal. What happens next? And then you get the payoff. The game over screen. The entire game you were warned with it, and now you get to see the actions of your failure. They really did put you in a suit, which crushed out your eyes and teeth. It's gruesome, it's horrifying, it's awesome. It's also the only time in the entire game where it's just silent. It's such an impact in a game where the sound design is basically all ambience. In Death, there's just silence. The only time in the entire game where there's peace, and the player is at peace. I feel like not a lot of people talk about this, but we are looking at a dead person right now. I always scared myself imagining how the day shift people would react to finding this the next morning. The fact that you can't even see the player's head also adds to the size of the suit. These animatronics were giant. We were helpless. And whoa, just like that, we're back into it. Wow. Yeah, the only real consequence of dying is just getting to try again, which to some extent is a real consequence when it comes to real life time management. A night in this game is about 8 to 9 minutes, which can be really frustrating having to try again, especially if you die on 5 AM or during a power outage, which remember is entirely decided by luck. Either way though, I got through night 3 this time. Again, the pure randomness of these characters does allow each attempt to feel unique. One attempt could literally be more harder than another. But either way, just over the halfway mark, on to night 4. Come on phone guy, what you got for me tonight?
Oh, hey, wow, day 4. I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did. Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. Oh no.
I'm sure he's fine, right? Now, at this point, the game is mostly scared through tension. Whether you were panicking whilst watching the characters get close to you, or you were panicking about losing power, or the animatronic designs in general just creeping you out. I'm not saying this game hasn't been scary, but other than the atmosphere and the character designs, the game hasn't really done too much to literally try and scare you, at least up front. Again, it's more building up tension, or sudden jump scares. But now, things get serious. You've just listened to the phone guy. Well, I can only imagine he got caught. This call beyond Night 4 allows us to, realistically, the player has heard all of these sound effects we just heard on the phone. The door banging by Foxy, the raspy breaths from Chica, Bonnie does them as well, and Freddy's song. The only outlier is the ending. When we got caught, the animatronic didn't make that scream. The jump scare noise is the same for all the characters, so this being specifically different is odd. But either way, the phone guy! He was literally 1 week away from retirement! It adds this new level of fear in retrospect. You're not just alone, but the guy before you literally died. And the fact that you've been looking in these cameras the past 3 nights and you've not seen any sign of him just adds to what he said in the beginning. The company removed any and all signs of him. It's like he never existed. The only proof is, well, the tapes you're listening to. And you've just heard his last one. His last moments. Him trying to convince himself that he might make it. It's sad, and it adds to the depravity of the situation you're in. Although, realistically, you would have already died at least once at this point, so you already know how serious the situation is, but yeah, you know, whatever. That's not all the night does, though, to really set the mood. From this point, whenever Chica and Bonnie get close to your office, they'll start to twitch and make this awful garbling noise. Sometimes you'll even be able to hear it off the cameras, which makes sense since these parts of the cameras are basically right next to your office. They're twitching the same way Freddy was all the way back in the title screen. Again, it's like they're holding back, like they're somehow restrained. It's really off-putting, actually. Again, it really gives the impression that this game is picking up the pace without just saying so, which, to be fair, it did say so in Night 3, so, give and take. Oh, and speaking of Freddy, he starts moving. Well, he actually first becomes active on Night 3, but he only has a tiny chance to actually move, so it's more common to see him on Night 4. It's all luck-based though, so you know, what do I know? Now, Freddy works differently from all the others as well. He's almost like the boss of this game, which, you know, makes sense, you're in his domain. Instead of moving randomly like Chica and Bonnie, he'll make his way on a set path to your office. He hides in the cameras. The only thing giving him away are his glowing eyes. I'm not even going to comment on why animatronics have glowing eyes, especially when he's not shown with them before, but either way. A cute detail is that you can hear his song play when he's in the kitchen. Remember, that camera's out of order, so you can't see when Chica or Freddy is in there. Which is interesting how the sound design also works into the gameplay itself. Without looking on the cameras to look where Chica or Freddy is, just hearing them in the kitchen, Chica will mess about with pots and pans and Freddy with his song. Again, it's interesting that without looking on the cameras, you can just hear where the characters are. It's an interesting dynamic. But yeah, the fact the song he plays is the same as when you run out of power makes me wonder if it's just pitch black in the kitchen, and maybe his song playing is just like an automatic reflex when it's dark. I don't know. It's not literally Freddy's song either. The popularity of the game basically claimed the song as Freddy's, but it's known as the Toreador March, a real song written in 1875. Either way then. Once Freddy gets to the hallway corner, instead of appearing in your blind spots like Bonnie or Chica, he'll just swoop right in if you're not paying attention. So, how do you stop him? Well, the phone guy's dead, so he can't really help us. Could have used that explanation on how to deal with him in Night 3, but no, let's talk about going limp, phone guy? Jeez. Now, Freddy can only move into your office once you flip your camera up, so one common way of dealing with him is just closing the door every time you flip it up. Again, nothing is actually told or conveyed to the player that Freddy moves when you flip the camera up, but closing the door literally works with everyone else, so maybe it's fair to assume the player would have at least some idea on how to deal with him. Another way to deal with him is Freddy won't move if you close your camera whilst you're on him. You still do need to check Foxy, but it's fairly easy to multitask both guys. Flip camera up, check Foxy, go back onto Freddy, flip down. Again, that's not told to the player, and for the record, unlike Bonnie and Chica and Foxy, where once you close their door, they'll leave, Freddy will stay at your door, or at least in very close proximity. Again, it's great for a boss battle that he'll slowly make his way to your office, and once he's there, he ain't leaving. Which, especially when you notice Freddy move off the stage and you have no idea how to deal with him, once again, that panic ensues. Whilst I guess Freddy does act close enough to Bonnie and Chica where even though they're panicking frantically, they might accidentally just keep Freddy at bay, just reacting to him the same way they would Bonnie and Chica. Oh, and also, at this point, the player has accustomed themselves to check Pirate's Cove. Over the first 3 nights, the player gets at least somewhat used to how the 3 characters work. You check the doors for Bonnie and Chica, and focus on Foxy on the cameras. As the player gets better at this game, they'll get more efficient with their power, which in this sense means not wasting power using the cameras checking for Bonnie and Chica. Realistically, they can show up at your door at any time. You might think that creates an unfair advantage then. If the player is always focusing on Foxy, how will the player even know that Freddy's moved? Well, he laughs. Do you remember what I said about Night 2? How the game gets you just comfortable enough to push you a little further into the deep end, make you panic just a little bit more? It does that once again. You have no idea where that laugh came from. You're told Freddy only moves in the dark, and you assume he only moves when you run out of power. Once again, you're thrown into a panic trying to figure out how to deal with him, all whilst he slowly but surely makes his way towards you, causing the same panic Chica and Bonnie caused all the way in Night 1. Now that all characters are out and about, now I can really show you the horrifying bliss of their designs. These designs are creepy. It's like I said all the way at the beginning with Freddy. They all have eyebrows and teeth. Well, most of them have eyebrows anyway. Sorry, Bonnie. Yet show no visible emotion. They truly look and feel soulless, cold, almost like you have no idea what they're thinking. Or can they even think? They're just robots. Why do they want to get in? Even in their jump scares. Like, Chica isn't really looking at you. If these animatronics can see us apparently, it's clearly not with their eyes. It's creepy. It's really similar to clowns, where there's something psychological going on that our minds struggle to understand them. They have just enough features for your brain to grasp what they are, but not enough to see anything deeper than that. It scares the mind because it doesn't really fully understand what it's looking at. Again, the designs show so much of their endoskeleton underneath, where looking at them, you can see the robot underneath and the fake animal head just stuck on top of it. It's this really creepy disillusion of what you're looking at. But anyway, that's basically Night 4. Freddy usually isn't that much of a problem on this night either. Again, he's basically got the same chance of moving as he does on Night 3, which again is entirely based on luck. He could screw you over straight away or just not move at all. Let's jump into Night 5. It's nearly home time. Unlike Nights 3 and 4, where Freddy only has a tiny chance to move, here he's very likely to. But other than that... Huh? Why is the phone ringing? There's no more messages, right? Did the phone guy survive? I don't think the phone guy is doing so well. I think what adds to the creepiness as well is we know the phone guy was finishing his last week, and that's probably when they started offering the job out, but assuming he recorded his messages exactly a week before you started, that would mean there was at least a few nights where there was probably no one watching over the animatronics, which to me invites this idea of, did they record this message somehow? It even sounds like the same garbled noises Bonnie and Chica make, and the same scream that ended the Night 4 call. Whoever got phone guy, did he come back to record this message the next night? Why? It's weird. Sadly, there's not much left to talk about Night 5. You'd have thought it being the last night, they'd have added something special. I guess Freddy being more active makes it stand out a bit more, but depending on your luck, he would have moved just as much on Night 3 and 4. It's just a harder night. It is a fair bit difficult. I don't want to give the impression that it's a nothing night. It just doesn't add anything we haven't seen in the previous 4 nights, you know? But there we have it. 5 nights. Hey, we get our paycheck, and we finally find out who we've been playing as this entire time. Mike Schmidt. What a name. And once again, the attention to detail makes even something as simple as a paycheck stand out in this game. We've only worked here 5 nights and we're already a valued employee. That's how you know this game is fiction. And we have the company name, Fazbear Entertainment. Turns out we've been working in, well, it's dollars, so it'd be American, so 12th of November. No year though. And we made $120. Divided over the 5 nights, that means we got paid $24 a night. Lovely. And considering it says see you next week, I guess this place is closed on weekends. Weird for a place for kids. You'd have thought weekends would have been the best time for them to be open, but either way. And that, dear folks, was Five Nights at Freddy's. Despite the game being over 10 years old now, just in a single playthrough, I hope I explained well enough how, impactful this game was. It's obvious to see why the game got so popular as it did. The designs of the animatronics, the sound design, the way the game increases the panic with almost every night, the interesting gameplay of watching the horror come to you. It's all just so great and...
Okay. You've gone on long enough. You've basically made hot, steamy love to this game for what, an hour? How's about you get real and talk about stuff that you don't like?
I mean, I have already mentioned certain points that haven't really aged well. I guess I can go a bit more in depth though. You mind if I quickly explain how the characters work?
You gonna break it down for me?
Of course! So, in super simple, every character has a difficulty number assigned to them at the start of the night. Its lowest can be 0, its highest can be 20. Every few seconds, a character will have a movement opportunity, where they basically roll a random number between 1 and 20. If the number they rolled is equal or less than their difficulty number, the character will move. Simple as that. So it's all percentage based, basically. When I say Freddy might not move on night 3, that's because his difficulty level is 1. So out of 20, that's a 5% chance to move every few seconds. It does get a bit more in depth, and certain characters have slightly unique twists on this, but for the most part, that is how the characters function in the game. If you're interested in the mechanics, I definitely recommend searching it for yourself, because there are some great videos that will explain it way better. But either way, with that explained, you can understand now what I mean when I say everything is luck-based. I hope that puts things more into perspective when I explain that the game can allow, although rare, some really unfair scenarios to happen. When Bonnie and Chica are at your door, they will only move, again, based on a movement opportunity. The idea being if your door is closed when they do that movement opportunity, then they'll leave your door. So the higher the difficulty number, the higher chance they have of leaving, which is weird because that means on the lower difficulties, they might actually drain your power quickly because, well, with lower difficulty, they have a lower chance to move away from your door, which would mean you would have to keep the door down for longer and waste more power. It's a weird dynamic. Oh, and running out of power, Freddy's difficulty level doesn't get affected in this. The entire power outage sequence is pure luck.
And that's good design, huh?
I mean, randomness can be good. It adds chaos, it adds replayability. Most roguelikes I play involve a lot of randomness.
But even in roguelikes, where 99% of the game is luck, even on a really unlucky run, the gameplay itself focuses on the skills of the player. Here, it doesn't matter if you're a good player or not. Bad luck just means bad luck. Game over. Waste another 10 minutes trying to beat the night. Enjoy trying again. Have fun knowing that every time a character moves, it's entirely based on luck. I mean, think about this. Considering how popular the game is, a lot of people have played it, right? How many people do you think just swam through the game with nearly no problems, simply because they got lucky? Whilst other people genuinely think Five Nights at Freddy's is one of the hardest games ever, just because they got really unlucky each night.
To be entirely fair, I don't think those scenarios would be very common.
But it's not impossible, is it?
Okay, yeah, technically that is true.
Also, whilst I'm here, you've rambled endlessly about how this is the scariest game ever. It's not that scary.
Horror can be subjective though.
Oh, not this again. Okay, I don't find it scary, and I wouldn't be that surprised if other people don't either. It's surprising sometimes. You might see something that might catch you off guard, but nothing that would really keep me up at night. And you can defend them all you want, but jump scares are cheap. No ifs, ands, or buts. Like, yeah, if anyone screamed in my face, I'm probably gonna be a little surprised. You didn't do anything special. You described tension as if it's the same thing as horror, but they're not the exact same, are they? I could see Foxy running down the hall and feel tension, but that's because I see a threat approaching me. That doesn't mean I'm scared, that just means I don't want to start the night over, you know?
Yeah, you probably are right, but I think regardless of what type of tension, the game still does a great job at keeping them high.
I mean, I guess. But even someone like you can get used to it eventually, right?
Which, again, to be fair, is different for everybody who plays the game, but you are right. I guess once we're on the topic of criticising, I do have a few different things of the game that don't fully sit right with me. I do think one of Five Nights at Freddy's greatest strengths is its immersion. How everything in the game feels in-game, in-universe, and with the game being first person, you can really melt yourself into the reality of the game world. And basically everything in the game world works to keep that immersion up. Think about this. Bonnie and Chica, even if they do enter your office and jam your doors, they can only kill you once you lift your camera up. So really, what is stopping you from just not lifting up your tablet? Simple. Foxy. So you might just think, keep your left door closed. Well, obviously not, because you run out of power and then Freddy will get you. Do you see? The game makes you play it. There's no shortcuts you can take or exploits to take advantage of. You can't not use the cameras, otherwise Foxy will get you, and if you're using the monitor, you have to check the doors for Bonnie and Chica. The game is like a perpetual motion machine where everything just works in tandem. Every character just fits so well into that loop, and that's just it. They're characters. It's a game, right? And a game has rules. But this game personifies its rules. Again, not using cameras, there's nothing in the game that actually tells you you can't do that. However, you have a character in-universe who doesn't allow you to do that. Keeping the doors down, you have limited power, which is a game rule. However, it presents itself in-universe. You don't get told Freddy kills you if you run out of power, it's just a fact in-universe. The power is the only thing keeping you safe. The in-game tutorial, the way you find out how to play, is a character. The phone guy is a character in-universe that tells you how to play within the confines of the world the game takes place in. Nearly everything in this game is in-universe. The first and last screens you see of this game are the job posting in the newspaper and the paycheck you get for completing your week. All this attention to detail, to the gameplay, the writing and the environment and character designs, it just feels so well thought out and placed. It's the art of really making a world feel alive, which is ironic for this game. It's really good immersion. Which, when the game does kind of act like a game, it becomes a lot more obvious. It sticks out more. I brought it up earlier, but the characters getting more active during the week, it doesn't make sense. It feels very like explaining a game rule, and honestly, it didn't even need to appear. Like, I'm sure the player would have noticed the characters being more active, and you could have stopped the explanation after saying,
it might be a good idea to peek at those cameras while I talk, just to make sure everyone's in their proper place, you know.
That's like playing a platformer, and once you get onto the level 2, the game just says, by the way, this level's going to be harder now. Like, yeah, probably. Again, for a game that seems to put so much effort into the immersion, lines like this stick out way more. Even though realistically that line was meant to just make the player panic a little more, like the characters are gonna move a little more now, I feel like there was just a better way to say it without sounding like a game explanation. At least to me, it took me out a little bit. Now, I know I brought it up earlier as one of the game's strongest strengths, but these characters are not animatronics. These are animatronics. Turns out I'm an animatronic nerd. Bet you didn't know that. Again, this game released in 2014, decades after animatronic arcades were popular, but this is what real-life animatronics looked like. Notice how even some of the oldest ones don't look robotic. They did have real suits what covered their entire bodies. Obviously, the goal wasn't to look like cyborg animals, it was to look like, effectively, puppets. And notice how when they open their mouths, you can't see the robotic parts inside, and you can't see metal mouths, because why would an animatronic need a metal mouth? In fact, I mentioned it earlier when I read the first phone call and he said the animatronics walk around. The reason I wasn't that scared is because, well, animatronics normally aren't scary, realistically. Appearance-wise, absolutely, they can look creepy, but in the sense of like what they can actually do to you? And also, this is what most of their legs looked like. Obviously, they couldn't really walk. Now, the not walking part isn't part of the criticism here. Obviously, it's a fictional game. But for a game that did seemingly put so much time and effort into the world building, you'd have expected more research going into making the animatronic characters actually look like animatronics, you know? Animatronics are such an interesting medium of entertainment, and making a horror game gave nearly an endless amount of opportunities for really interesting character designs. But he kind of settled on just making robots with animal heads on them. You could argue that this just adds to the world building in the sense of it shows you how derived Fazbear Entertainment is, like who is building animatronics with endoskeletons with jaws and teeth, which is fair enough. And I'm not saying the designs are bad, I really love their designs as characters. It just feels a lot more sci-fi than the animatronic vibe I assume the game was going for. I guess my main point is, I'm not saying I don't like these, I just wonder if a game with more accurate looking animatronics would have been better, you know? Or maybe some type of middle ground. I wouldn't be surprised if they made the endoskeleton and almost wanted to make the suits show the endoskeleton, like, because that would be creepy. You can see the friendly character with the, like, the metal parts underneath. I feel like there was still definitely a way you could have done that while still making them look like accurate animatronics. Heck, I would argue making them look more accurate would have probably made them even scarier. And then the map. The whole point I was trying to get at here. Again, with the amount of attention to detail that's in the individual cameras, the map as a whole sticks out so much. The layout is weird. Like, think about it sincerely. Why would an arcade for kids have 2 dedicated hallways to the office where realistically only one person's going to? Oh, and speaking of arcades, there just isn't one? I guess that could be on me for assuming there'd be an arcade. Again, most animatronic places Freddy seems to be based on were arcade and pizza places. Maybe this is just a pizza place? Like, you just show up and have a pizza, then leave? That feels weird to me. There's only one dining area as well. Is Pirates Cove just in a separate room or just next to the dining area? Oh, and you gotta love a backstage that isn't actually at the back of the stage, right? This almost feels like instead of doing research into animatronic pizza places for accuracy, it was more of the creator just knew what animatronics were and wanted to make something that invoked that idea without really doing any research into it specifically, you know? Again, with the character designs, you could argue that the weirdness of this map adds to the charm of the game. And I think I would agree with you. As weird as this place is, I don't specifically think it's unrealistic, and at least from a gameplay perspective, it does work. Again, like the animatronics, I don't think this is specifically bad, I just can't help but imagine the game being better if it really was like an actual rundown arcade restaurant, you know? Again, doing research into real life arcade restaurants, there's so many ideas you could have taken from what would have worked perfectly in a scenario like this. Imagine a busy arcade room where you can barely see the animatronics behind the machines, or a soft play area where when the characters walk in, they don't have any footsteps because of the soft flooring. So you'd have no way to know when a character enters or leaves that area, so you have to check the cameras. I am getting ahead of myself though. For what it is, it does work. And I suppose any more rooms does run the risk of there being too many cameras to check. Again, what we have is nice, I just can't help but imagine what could have been. And also, this criticism is a little bit weird, because I don't think this is specifically the creator's fault. It's just like, in hindsight, it does stick out a bit. The posters. Again, in a real life pizzeria restaurant, you wouldn't just have pictures of the animatronics with text above them saying, celebrate. It's like the Muppets in a way, where it's like, if you draw the Muppets, you're not just going to take a picture of the real life puppet. No, you're going to draw them as the character that they are. I imagine in universe when kids come to this place, they're not here for robot animals, you know, they're here for the characters. So it's weird that even in the posters, they are just pictures with text instead of, you know, drawn. Which again, to be fair, the creator might not be an artist, so I'm not saying I expect that, it just, again, it sticks out a little bit. And again, you could argue that it just adds to the cheapness of this place. Instead of getting a cartoonist to draw the characters, they did literally just take pictures. Which again, isn't bad, it's just something I thought is worth mentioning. And the final point, I promise, this doesn't make sense to me when I first saw this game when it released, and it still doesn't make sense to me now. Why does it cost power to drop the doors? If I explain that closing a door costs power, you just kind of imagine that it does make sense. But when you look at what the game is showing you, why would it keep more power to drop something down than to keep it up? You could have just edited the animation to have the doors rise from the floor instead, which would have made at least a little more sense as to, you know, why it's costing power, it's keeping them up. Like basically everything else I've said in this segment, it's nothing major or game breaking, it doesn't ruin anything per se, it is just, it sticks out.
The game has good world building, but sometimes it doesn't. It really took you that long just to say all of that?
Hey, you can chime in at any time if you got anything to add.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that guy. Why is he here?
I invited him. I thought it'd be on theme.
What, because he's creepy and twitchy? That's profiling, dude.
Did somebody say twitchy and creepy?
Hey, I told you jump scares were cheap. What's he doing here?
I also invited him.
I just love games with a good story.
Ha! Well, good luck with this game. Sitting in a room for 5 nights isn't exactly Shakespeare. Anyway, this place is getting crowded. I'm out of here.
Well, be careful.
Ah, tush.
Hey, why haven't you played the extra night?
Extra night? Oh yeah. Night 6. Well, that's interesting. What more could there be? no phone call. Weird. Having one every night really builds that habit of you expecting one, so starting this night with nothing really stands out. But yeah, for the most part, night 6 is just a harder night, which is, again, it's a nice little something extra for the player to chew on. A full night in this game is about 8 minutes and 55 seconds, so even if you die a few times, realistically you can be done with the main story in about 2 hours. Heck, if you catch on quickly how to play, you can beat the entire game in about 44 minutes. I think the game used to be a little more expensive when it first released, but at least now it's sitting at £4, which is pretty cheap. So even lasting about 1 to 2 hours is pretty decent value, and having an extra night to really test your skills, it's good. With the difficulty being really high now, the game makes an interesting transition. By all means, it's still a horror game, but it turns into a more technical experience. The creepy sounds and ambience start to become less focused in your mind as you start to focus more and more on your skills. You start to use the cameras basically exclusively for Foxy and Freddy, whilst constantly checking the doors for Bonnie and Chica. You focus more on the power you're using, so you get an idea on when to slow down a little bit. You check the time more often, seeing how many hours you gotta last compared to the power you have left. Yes, a lot of luck is involved about, when the characters move, but that's not to say that skill isn't important here either. It's interesting. The game is a survival horror, and I think it balances both of those out perfectly. When you first play the game, you're playing a horror. But once you get used to everything, you start to focus on the survival aspect. I said a similar thing with E when I made a video on that, but FNAF works really well as a gateway horror. A horror to get you into other horrors. Like, playing this for your first time can be really scary. I've already explained why, but it's never too scary to where you want to just stop playing. You want to keep trying to see if you can survive the next night. No matter how bad it gets, you do find yourself trying again. Which, again, can be like a real job. Beating Night 6 gets you another funny end screen. You earn some overtime. Wait, is Night 6 just worth 50 cents? Or are we getting paid $120.50 just for one night? Either way, that doesn't make sense. If one night is worth $24, why is surviving another just worth 50? Is that just like an overtime thing? Well, at least we're now the employee of the month. And then we unlock Night 7. It just keeps going. It's a custom night. Again, what a great way to add replay value. This effectively gives us an endless amount of nights we can play. It's also the first time you actually would find the characters' names out other than Freddy. In fact, when this game came out, I remember there being a lot of discussion as to what their names were. Obviously, people wouldn't know because they hadn't beaten the game yet. It's weird the phone guy didn't really mention them all by name. Although apparently Bonnie, Chica and Foxy were placeholder names that stuck around, so maybe the phone guy didn't mention their names because at the time the creator wasn't sure of their names. But yeah, custom night. It's a shame there's not really too much to be done here. Like, if you want to just see how the animatronics move with no worry of losing a night, I guess you can, but you've already beaten Night 6 at this point. You've already gotten decently good at the game, so it's not like you'd want to give yourself an easy night, right? Also, the buttons to control the difficulty are really finicky. You have to click each individual time you want to increase or decrease. Plus, this is probably me expecting too much, but wouldn't it have been awesome to just include an extra character or two? We already have the endoskeleton modelled, and well, Bonnie and Freddy basically have the exact same body, so it wouldn't have been that difficult to just model a few extra characters and implement them. The player's already beaten all the game at this point, so having an extra character or two to just mess around with and have fun with would have been a really fun incentive for beating the game. All of this is bonus content though. It didn't have to be there at all, so it just being included is a really nice detail. I did mention earlier that it's very arcade-like. The game just gets harder and harder, so it does feel weird that there's a definitive 5 nights. I wonder if an endless mode where you could have played up until as many nights as you could, with the difficulty scaling the longer you play, would have been a really fun idea. In old gameplay videos, we can actually see the game was planned to have a life system. I think the idea was, if you lost all of your lives, you'd have to start from night 1, which, considering how much luck is involved in the game, is probably a good idea it didn't make it to the final release. But again, some sort of true arcade mode with lives and endless nights, maybe even a point system or something, I feel like that could have gone a super long way. I guess I'm just thinking of ways you'd want to add replay value. Again, none of this is necessary. It's just that replaying the game normally is arguably its biggest flaw. I've used the term especially for the first time players a lot, and that's on purpose. This game is great if it's your first time playing. On your second time playing through, 95% of the horror, the tension is gone. There's no more surprises since you already know who does what. There's little tension since dying just makes you start over. And since you've already beaten the game, you're almost too good for the game now. You'll spend the first 3 to 4 nights playing as if you're on night 6. You'll be rapidly checking the cameras and door lights as if the animatronics are rapidly moving and attacking when they're just not. it's actually fairly easy to get bored replaying the game. Now, don't get me wrong, it is still a fun game. It's very fun to watch. Again, mostly if you're new to the game as well. Like a first-time player and a first-time watcher will honestly have a really similar experience going through it. But again, once that seal is broken, at least to me, I don't think it comes back on. Again, it's really easy to occasionally get a little bored. To be entirely fair, the game doesn't give you too much reason to want to replay anyway. The time it takes to complete a night will always be the same, so there's no speedrunning value. And if you want to challenge yourself, you can just try the custom night. It is a cheap game though, where just doing one normal playthrough is already getting your money's worth. It's not like you have to replay the game to, get any value out of it. I will also mention, most people don't see Night 7 as a custom night. They usually see it as the night you can put all the characters onto the hardest difficulty, the true challenge night. The creator himself originally thought it was impossible, so you'll be in for a challenge. For reference, Freddy is at his absolute hardest difficulty in Night 6, and it's level 4. So having him at 20 makes him an absolute monster to deal with. You get little completion stars for playing the game. You get one for beating Night 5, a second for beating Night 6, and it was eventually added that you can get a third one for beating the hardest night on Night 7. So technically it is required for having 100% completion. However, that star was added in a retroactive update once it was proven that you could actually beat the hardest night. So I still see it as a personal challenge. Hear my warning though, dear traveller. If you beat 420 mode, that's the name because 4 characters on the 20 difficulty, you will have no reason to ever play this game. At least for a while. Think about it. You'd have completed the absolute hardest challenge the game could possibly give you. You have literally nowhere to go. You'd have conquered too many mountains where all you have left is nothing. I completed it once several years ago and I still struggle to enjoy this game. Again, the habits of playing the game as if you're on a much harder night than what you actually are, it does affect the game a lot. Oh, and beating Night 7, no matter what difficulty the characters are on, gives this. Management fires us. Now, Night 5 specifically says the end when you beat it, but it also says that when you beat Night 6 and 7, so it's up in the air whether they're actually canon or not to the story. But what a fun note to end on if it is. For a game all about working in a harsh environment, it's a fun note ending on it being the player getting fired. Freedom, in a sense, In fact, I've mentioned it a few times that the games almost feel like how a real job is at times. And I think that was on purpose. I've mentioned the game's charm, how the creator of this game, his name is Scott Cawthon by the way, you can get a good idea on what his style of humour is in this game. And he's blended it in with corporate mismanagement really well. Again, this work environment is literally deadly, and yet the corporate memo is still required to say Freddy's is a place for kids and grown-ups alike. Heck, a popular meme from this game is the phone guy saying,
"The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night,"
which a lot of people find funny for the use of quirky, which is funny, but when you realise that the phone guy is using that word to describe the animatronics literally stuffing you into a machine that gouges your eyes and teeth out, the fact that he can describe that with such a goofy word adds to the depravity that this company does not care about safety. And I feel like to some extent, that was the story Scott wanted to tell with this game. The phone guy just giving you ideas on how to survive if you get caught. It gets normalized in game, but think about it for a second. Why are you at a job that has any chance of killing you? I do think there's a weird sense of humour in the absolute craziness that is this job. And I think Scott intended that. On the bottom right hall camera, you can see a list of rules at Freddy's. On the same list as the creepy rules of don't stay after dark, don't touch Freddy, there's don't poop on the floor. You want to tell me an adult who actually knew what they were doing placed that there? No! I think the night starting straight after you complete one was also done on purpose as well. Again, I feel like it's a joke at the player's expense. You just completed a night. Good job! Now on to the next one! Heck, even beating Night 5, the end screen has the most condescending, good job sport, see you next week. I didn't really know where else to put this, but you can boop the nose on Freddy on the poster. Like, you can't deny the amount of charm and weird humour that's in this game. It feels like he wanted the player to constantly be saying, "What?" to each new thing you learn about the place you're working at. The humour being everybody else looking in from the poor sap's point of view, which again is partially true nowadays. In fact, I've not really said too much about Scott, but he's made several previous games in the past and even done animated videos. It's interesting looking back at these because although some of them do get dark in parts, none of them are specifically horror. And some of his previous games even follow the same formula of this one, arcade-like and repetitive gameplay. And looking back at some of these videos, and where the humour comes from, it's very similar to the type of humour you find in Freddy's.
Merry Christmas. Go away.
Condescending, sarcastic, almost grouchy if those words make sense, which all do blend together as jokes coming from a corporation who doesn't care about the work environment really well, right? I don't think this game was intended to have any commentary, per se. I do think he found at least some form of humour being stuck in a job you not only hate, but pays tiny, has killer robots, and it's like the most seediest place on earth. But you know, gotta pay rent somehow. There is a surprising amount of humour to that. And to be fair, I do find some humour in places with the whole strung together with sticky tape and a dream vibe to them. That's basically what I'm trying to run. This one just goes to a whole new extreme. Again, it is horror. I guess the extreme here being people have died. It's not just negligence, but the specific covering up of the death and depravity that this place has allowed. The fact that the phone guy recorded messages, recorded his own death, and even possibly a robot managed to record a voice note, and they all get played to you, implies that the company, although cleaning his body away, put no real effort into hiding the fact that he did work and died there, you know? As funny as it is outside the fact, inside the game, negligence isn't funny when you're the victim of it. There's no way, right? Hang on, Freddy's actually taken a really long time. There's no way, right? I recorded this as a fluke. There's no way, right? There's no way I beat this on my second attempt. There's no way. There's no way. Damn. Well, that's gotta go in the video, surely. What? I just did it. Huh? Huh? Holy moly, guacamole. I just did it. I just did it. Am I that guy? Am I that guy? My heart's going crazy right now. This is just a crazy... I was just recording footage. Just because I realized I didn't actually record me attempting any 420 modes. I just did it. I just did it straight away. Damn.
Hey, look! Billy found pizza!
You know, it actually tastes pretty good.
Do you think we should tell him that's just the decoration pizza they put on the walls?
No, but he looks so happy!
Wait a minute, is someone there? You can't have this pizza! It's mine!
He'll be okay, right?
Yeah, probably.
Should I ask the yellow fellow to check in on him? Classic yellow. But anyway, when are you gonna talk about the story?
I basically did. I've covered the entire game at this point.
But you haven't even touched on the lore!
Lore. It feels like almost a buzzword nowadays, especially when it comes to indie games and just stories in general. I've seen people comment on videos where the video itself is just telling a story and people in the comments will specifically call it lore, as if lore means story, which it doesn't. Literally speaking, according to the Oxford Dictionary, lore means a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or held by a particular group, typically passed from person to person by word of mouth. So, in simple, lore is the traditions and knowledge of a story, the history and laws that inhabit the world in which a story takes place. When writing a story, you're rarely just writing the story. If the story takes place in a fictional world, the lore would be there to help explain the history of that world, right? If I wrote a story about a stickman and his brother being separated at birth for appearing different, the lore would be there to explain if the world is only inhabited by stickmen, why is it a stickman world, what laws are in place that this would allow the siblings to be separated, why is there stigma against differences in this world in the first place. I'll admit, the definition is a little weird, and I'm not even 100% sure I'm correct, but at least from my judgment, the lore is there to supplement the story by explaining its history and explain how the world works. So, what does that have to do with FNAF? It's honestly a pretty cut and dry story. You look for a job, you get a job, you work for a week, you get fired. However, earlier in this video, I mentioned the Easter eggs, the hallucinations, and there is a handful that almost give a hint that there's maybe something going on behind the scenes. It's fairly rare, however, when checking the right hallway corner, the safety rules will change into newspaper clippings. They read as follows. Kids vanish at local pizzeria. Bodies not found. 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room during the late hours of operation at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on the night of June 26th. While video surveillance identified the man responsible and led to his capture the following morning, the children themselves were never found and are presumed dead. Police think that the suspect dressed as a company mascot to earn the children's trust. 5 children now reported missing. Suspect convicted. 5 children are now linked to the incident at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where a man dressed as a cartoon mascot lured them into a back room. While the suspect has been charged, the bodies themselves were never found. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been fighting an uphill battle ever since to convince families to return to the pizzeria. It's a tragedy. So, a little dark. The harmful negligence gets taken up big time here. This whole time I was explaining how unsafe it was to work here, I almost forgot how unsafe it would be for the children who came here for fun, in a place where they should have been safe. What stands out though is 2 children supposedly went missing, leading to his arrest the next morning. It's interesting that later on 3 more children went missing. Were the previous 3 children already missing, and it wasn't until they arrested the guy they realised that they were all connected? Or did they arrest the guy, release him, and re-arrest him when more children went missing? Either way though, he at least got charged, which isn't much. Charged literally just means formally accused of a crime, and since they don't mention any jail time, he probably managed to get away. Local pizzeria threatened with shutdown over sanitation. Local pizzeria, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, has been threatened again with shutdown by the health department over reports of foul odour coming from the much-loved animal mascots. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. Gross. The phone guy even subtly hints at this.
If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
Looking at the models now though, there's no blood or mucus, so yay? I guess this implies the newspapers aren't from right now if the robots look a lot cleaner than the newspaper suggests. Local pizzeria said to close by year's end. After a long struggle to stay in business after the tragedy that took place there many years ago, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has announced that it will close by year's end. Despite a year-long search for a buyer, companies seem unwilling to be associated with the company. These characters will live on in the hearts of kids. These characters will live on. CEO. It's closing by year's end. Well, judging by the payslip, this place only has about 7 weeks. Now, there is an argument to be made how out of place these newspapers are, especially with how fast-paced the game gets on later nights. It'd be really awkward to stop and read random newspapers, especially when 4 appear, each at random in a random order, or whilst trying to survive the regular gameplay. Even if you find these on earlier nights, like nights 1 and 2, if you're new to the game, you might not even really understand that what you found was rare and was just the background. Although the headlines are decently sized, the static also makes it really hard to read these in-game. Criticism apart though, this is a harrowing story, and it elevates the atmosphere so much that it does suck a little bit that you don't get to learn about it throughout the regular gameplay. It's all explained through these random hallucinations, which, if these are hallucinations, why is Mike, the guy we're playing as, hallucinating these newspaper clippings? I suppose if he's working here, he might have done some research and learnt about it beforehand. In fact, is that also why he's hallucinating those crying faces? Is he subconsciously aware that children went missing in this place? It's creepy. And that's another fascinating part of FNAF, what it doesn't tell you. The story here is really interesting because, well, think of this. The newspapers tell a story of 5 children going missing and presumed dead, and the next article focuses on how the animatronics are oozing out blood and mucus. The children's bodies were never found, but the animatronics were oozing out blood. Although the game doesn't tell you specifically, it's extremely easy to connect those dots and assume that the children's bodies were hidden in the suits of the animatronics, letting them fester and rot inside these machines. It doesn't literally mention it, but if parents called the police, and the fact that the robots appear clean now, at least implies that the children were at least taken out eventually, right? In fact, could this relate to my criticism of the animatronics looking really robotic? Were they altered to specifically show the endoskeleton inside, almost as a failsafe to show people that there's no kids there? I don't know if that's what Scott intended when making those models, but if so, fair play. And that's what makes FNAF's story so interesting. It hides clues, arguably, not that great. Again, it's look-based and hard to read, but it still hides its clues within the game that do expand on the history of this place. Alright, yeah, the lore. It's weird, it only really gives enough clues to at least understand the outline of the story though. Like, what other clues does it give us? Well, we've actually been seeing them all game. Think about this. 5 victims that were all in suits stuck inside these machines, presumably for a while. What do robots do when they see night guards? Stuff them into a suit, the same way the missing children presumably were. In fact, the twitching the characters do, the creepy garbles and noises they make, how Freddy and Foxy have glowing eyes, the fact that the robots can somehow see, how Bonnie and Chica have these raspy breaths. How's a robot breathing? Unless there was more to it. Could the robots be possessed by the missing children? And just like that, the story is being elevated. It's not just a story about a job. It's not just about 5 missing children. It's the combination of those two. Is the place we're working at this entire time being haunted by missing children? Does that explain why they roam around at night? Why they want to get in? The negligence that allowed them to fall in harm's way? Do they want to force their demise onto others now? That makes me think of the hallucinations in a different way. Are they truly hallucinations, or are they just ghostly images the children want you to see? That would explain the Freddy poster being this thing. Is Freddy trying to tear its mask off, show the victim underneath? Before you see the crying children poster, you see Chica, Freddy and Bonnie. Do the ghosts want people to know who they are? In fact, is that why you see "It's me" everywhere? Again, these are missing children, right? Do they want people to know where they are? Chica, Freddy, Bonnie, and even Foxy. It's me. Is that why we randomly hallucinate pictures of Freddy and Bonnie along with the words "It's me"? They're trying to tell us. You also specifically see Freddy with human eyes. Could this be the children's way of telling you that there's a human in this suit? It's super interesting, and it's what elevates FNAF to something even much more. It wasn't just a super fun game, it wasn't just a super creepy game, it was also a super interesting game. There's so many different cracks in its story to peek in. Half the fun you have is outside the game, I feel like, looking at what other people have discovered, trying to figure out what the story is. It's funny to think about, but part of me thinks that Scott didn't even intend the story to be that deep. Again, look at his previous games. Horror was clearly an unexpected move at the time. Plus, from what I remember from interviews, he would have shown this game to family members for feedback and stuff, which first of all is sincerely, it's beautiful to have that type of support. But also, part of me wonders if he wanted to hide the gory, creepy, dead children possessing robots, because again, if you're showing that to your family, what you're making, you probably don't want them to know you're writing a story about people getting away with murdering 5 kids, right? So I wonder if he wanted the ghost story part of the story more hidden. Maybe he wasn't even sure how much of a horror he wanted this game to be. It's entirely a theory, but the focus on the job humour and how, although hidden, the story itself is fairly simple. It makes me at least wonder, did he want to hide the story, but in doing so that made it more valuable, more interesting? Plus, as simple as the story is, it definitely works in the game's favour. Without sounding too fancy schmancy, games are an art form. Realistically, you can take a game's story and make whatever sense of it you want. Heck, I just played through the game once not knowing the animatronics were possessed, and there was nothing wrong with that. And the same works for most games. Like other forms of art, you take from it what you want. The interesting thing about Five Nights at Freddy's, though, is that throughout regular gameplay, it does make the player ask questions. Why are the robots twitchy and garbly? Why do we need metal doors to keep them away? Now, other forms of art allow the questions to be answered in whatever way they want. It's up to the interpretation of the viewer. However, Freddy's almost asks you to pay attention and discover the story the game wants you to discover, If you want to know the answers, you can find them here. There's little interpretation to be had here. I mean, how many of you are watching this sincerely screaming at me about the possessed robots? The game itself doesn't really confirm it, yet it basically is a fact at this point, And at the time, not many games did that. Games had stories, obviously, and interesting details that help give answers to overarching questions, but nothing fully like this. Freddy's almost hides its entire story, but it allows you to find it. Everything what needs to be explained does. Why do the robots do? Ghosts. I say everything it needs to explain because there's still so many open-ended questions we don't get answers to here. What happened to the murderer? Why did he do it? Cartoon mascot? Are these characters cartoon mascots? That's not mentioned in the game. The phone guy mentions suits when these are clearly not suits, so does Freddy Fazbear's also just have suits? Or are these meant to be soft suits and I've just clearly not understood it? What is the Bite of 87? Like, seriously? In fact, did the possessed robots cause the Bite of 87? If they're all twitchy, could that explain it? Assuming the Bite of 87 takes place in 1987, I'm guessing that's what it means, does that mean the kids were possessed in 1987? How old are these newspapers? In fact, when does this game take place? The game creates an opportunity for a lot of questions. There is an argument for how important these questions are for the enjoyment of the game. At the very least, it does explain and answer what it needs to keep our interests piqued, you know? Like, I've mentioned the amount of care Scott put into the design of this game, giving just enough hints to figure out a story. Even as something as simple as the end screen, like I mentioned earlier, we get $24 a night. Divide that by the 6 hours we do each night, and that's about $4 an hour, which, in America, the minimum wage in 2014, the year this game released, was at least $7. So if this did take place in 2014, we'd be getting at minimum $220. So we have a clear indication that Scott wanted us to know that this game wasn't present day. Doing the math, we'd need to find a year with a $4 minimum wage, which would land us somewhere in the 1990s, which does make a lot more sense given animatronic places like this. They were very out of fashion even in 2014, let alone today. In fact, knowing it takes place in the 90s, you can actually find the exact year just by looking at the dates. Given that we probably did start the week on Monday and got paid Friday, we can find a date where the 12th of November lands on a Friday, which I did. It lands us on the year 1993, which again, just shows to at least some degree Scott did know what he was doing, and not just throwing random Easter eggs at the wall. There was a level of care on what type of story he was trying to tell. I suppose in hindsight, the phone guy saying Freddy's friends get more active as the week progresses, as much as I don't like that line, it does help us indicate what year the game takes place in, so maybe that's also why that line was included. Which again, although I probably don't like it, fair enough.
Wowie zowie! I told you this game had a good story.
I didn't disagree with you on that. It was Tui. Oh crap, Tui!
What does this... nope. That's just sprung a nail in between my ribs. If, anyone can hear this, can you hop in the backstage and unhinge all these gizmos and whatsits out of my flesh? Preach.
Redface, do you mind checking the empty heads?
Sure, why not? Can you turn around?
Sure, but why?
Okay, I have checked your head.
The empty head's in the backstage.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, now, if you was paying attention to when I was reading the newspapers, I explained that 5 missing children went missing, but there's only 4 characters. Again, a super interesting move for the game to take its story. In explaining something, you create just a few more questions to keep people interested. So, where is the 5th child? Well, if you check the backstage, the naked Endo in there does occasionally move, but so do all the other heads, so maybe that's more of a hallucination. Well, checking the left hall, Freddy's poster has a small chance to change into this. You'll even hear a giggle. And when you drop your camera, this is... I have no idea. The game doesn't mention him at all by name, and the game files have him as Yellow Bear. Which, I mean, I guess that is what he is. He'll appear slouched in your office. If you lift your camera up, he'll leave, as if he was never there. But if you don't, you get this unique jump scare. Now, this doesn't just kill you, it literally closes the game. And also, if this sounds familiar, it's because it is. It's the same sound we hear at the end of the phone guy's Night 4 and 5 calls. So, does this perhaps explain that Yellow Bear was the one who got the phone guy? Or better yet, was he the one who left Night 5's message? He does randomly appear in the office right by the desk, where you'd expect the phone recorder to be. And also, the creepy garblings that Bonnie and Chica do are the same garblings that are in the Night 5 phone call. So there is a connection there, which, side note, these aren't just random garbles. They're distorted, but when re-storted, I guess, they sound like this. Which, there's also text here so you can actually understand it. The reason we know exactly what it says is that it's directly from a book. Autobiography of a Yogi, which, as another side note, did Scott read this book? I ain't judging anything, I just genuinely want to know. Now, I don't fully understand what this paragraph means specifically, but a lot of people have explained to me that it describes the essence of human life, plant life, and metal all sharing the same life force. I don't fully understand that, but sure, it kind of links into the whole possessed machinery in a weird way, you know? Metal having a life force. In fact, looking at Scott's previous work, he clearly is a huge fan of sci-fi and that grungy metal aesthetic. That probably explains why these look more robotic than animatronic, but metal having a human life force is a very sci-fi idea. Making it more of a horror possession story is a great way to twist it. The inclusion of the Yogi book almost makes me wonder if, although it is meant to be, you know, dead children possessing these robots, did Scott originally intend there to be more of a spiritual reason, or I almost want to say religious reason, you know what I mean, like a power beyond us controlling this, you know? It's also creepy thinking about why the robots are specifically garbling this out though. Like, did whoever stuffed the children into these suits do it on purpose? Like, did they hide the bodies in the animatronics and they just so happened to get possessed? Or did the killer specifically try and get these animatronics to come to life, repeating this verse over and over and over until they're almost hypnotized with it? Again, nothing's confirmed, but it is creepy nonetheless. Huge tangent aside though, Yellow Bear. Looking closely does reveal whites in his eyes, and given the obvious child laugh, yeah, it's probably possessed. Which, fun fact, this laugh is actually Freddy's laugh, just in a different pitch. I don't think there's any specific story there, more, you know, it's just reusing assets. Although, this being a different version of Freddy is interesting. We know two kids were probably killed together. Could they have been siblings, each put in a different Freddy suit? Probably not. Although, the fact you only see on the same poster that regular Freddy is, and you also have a chance of seeing Freddy take his head off, and the poster is only yellow Freddy's head, with the laugh just being a more sped up version of Freddy's, could this Freddy be like a corrupted version? Again, probably not, but that's what Freddy's does. It gives you a lot of random clues, with only a few of them really making sense. The interesting thing about this character though is how they're obviously limp. The same thing Phone Guy said we should do. But I don't think this is meant to be the Phone Guy or anything. Again, we hear this guy screams when he gets Phone Guy, so he can't be the Phone Guy. I don't know if it's meant to literally be like a limp in the sense of like it's an empty suit. You can clearly see the robotic joints in between its parts, so it probably does have an endoskeleton in there. However, I still can't tell if these are meant to be suits or not, so some of the story might be harder to explain simply because what makes sense to the creator probably doesn't make sense to me, which is a real trap to happen in storytelling. You could say, since he just appears out of nowhere, that it's a hallucination, representing the suit the murderer used to lure children into the bat. Or you could say that this is the fifth missing child. You could also say it's both. It'd explain why he stopped at 5. He stuffed the children into the 4 animatronics and used the suit he used to hide the last child. Again though, who can say what Scott was trying to explain with this guy? In the custom night, making the numbers 1987 causes him to appear, which, that was added in an update about 11 days after the game released. Scott added that because people were making up stories about getting a unique ending by typing 1987 with the numbers. He added it as an in-game joke, scaring people, again furthering my thoughts that this game is mostly just Scott trolling the player. Although 1987 probably has no relation to the character, again, Scott likely added this as a joke, and the fact that he released it so close to the game already being finished, maybe he was like, you know, the story's one and done, he's not going to build up on it anymore. This probably has no story relevance, although it is interesting that he specifically chose this character to do the jump scare and not literally any other. I don't think it's just a hallucination though. Again, it screams at you, it feels more impactful than just the other hallucination. Plus, don't forget, you hear it screams in the night 4 and 5 phone call. Although ghostly, I do think it's physically there. Don't forget, the animatronics got cleaned, presumably because parents called about the smells, but we don't know if this character was on stage at any point. Was he clean? Is the child still just there? Is that why he's more ghostly? Again, the game leaves a lot for the player to decide. Again, it's a super interesting part of Freddy's. Although there is clearly a story, there's so many hints and Easter eggs at so many different angles, you can realistically decide for yourself what happens. Again, it's an art. Whoa, hey, buddy. Seriously though, can we not knock before turning corners in this place or something? Anyway, what do you think of this place? Awesome, I think. I also want to talk about if the game has aged well. This game was a trendsetter. It effectively created the genre of horror known as mascot horror, which is a whole can of worms we'll leave for now. But as is the fashion with games, it's normal to want to one-up the previous one. As the genre grows, you get more people experimenting with new ideas and pushing the boundaries on what can be expected with games like this. Now, I don't really play other mascot horrors, so I can't really say how well FNAF stacks up against them, but people have made fan games that heavily reuse the gameplay formula the first game introduced. produced, and people are still making fan games, and most people like them. I think Scott really struck gold of the gameplay formula of watching the horror come to you. I think if the game released now, I imagine people would still be suckered into this fun twist on horror. And again, it's a cheap game, so there's no argument to whether you get your money's worth. Yeah, you get a 2014 experience, but it's a 2014 price as well, so there's literally nothing to complain about. The only real problem is, again, chances are, if you're playing the game, you know all the secrets and surprises. It can still be scary and panicky, but it truly is one of those games you can only fully experience once, you know? And like I said with Night 7, once you do everything there is to do, the game gives you little to no reason to want to come back, which I understand could just be a me problem. When you love a game so much, you almost want it to give you more reasons to play, you know? And now to talk about, well, I feel like I've basically said everything there is to say about this game. Yeah. Do you have anything to add? Yeah. I've sung its praises, and I've criticised what I didn't think was good, but all in all, it's really easy to see what made Five Nights at Freddy's such a popular game. It's cheap, fun to play and to watch, it's a great introductory horror, getting less scary the more you play, almost warming you up to more horror games. The game basically has two stories, the one you play through and the one you figure out afterwards. The care of attention and detail, the almost sympathetic horror of the story, the idea of these being children really got people interested and caring about these characters. Even with them showing no personality in-game, people really connected with them. Obviously, a lot of YouTubers covered these games, which helped the games a lot, but it also stands to the game's credit as well. The game was just fun to watch, to learn about and discuss, just as it was to play on your own. And that's a sincere credit to the talent of Scott Cawthon. Scott Cawthon. I've mentioned his name a few times. At least to me, he's also one of the reasons I respect this game so much. I've mentioned some of his past work, and you can still see a lot of his charm within those works. If you're a Freddy's fan, you probably already know this, but here's how the story goes. Before making Five Nights at Freddy's, he was still a game developer. He'd been making games for almost 20 years at this point. He released a game called Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., a game about Chipper and his son, obviously. Sadly, people didn't like this game, which, you know, it happens. But one comment about the game specifically stuck with Scott. The character designs looked like creepy animatronics. Which, yeah, I do understand that. They ironically look more like animatronics than the FNAF characters do. Again, having been trying to make games for nearly 2 decades, and for this one to be ridiculed, he was about ready to give up. He was going to stop making games. He wanted to make one final game. Not so much a final attempt, but just a final page, a one and done, using the very criticism that was thrown at him. Creepy animatronics? I quite like that name. And obviously, lo and behold, what was something of a swan song became more of a swan's egg. As in, you know, it grew into something grand and beautiful. I'll stop pretending like this is my first time playing for a second, because spoiler alert, the game did pretty well. It created sequels, it created spin-offs, books and movies. And that's all just the official stuff. I've been ignoring one of the coolest parts about Five Nights at Freddy's. The community. This game inspired people to make songs, fan games, theories and videos. Isn't that awesome that one piece of art can inspire so many other people to create even more art? It's beautiful. My absolute favourite part about Five Nights at Freddy's? Its name. When you say it, it isn't just the game. It represents the entire franchise, spanning over so many mediums, a fandom full of so many incredible and talented people. When people say Five Nights at Freddy's, they're not just thinking about this game. They're thinking about everything that came from someone's final attempt at trying to make something. As someone who's dreamed of making games and stories and creating characters that people care about basically my entire life, I have no choice but to respect the amount of dedication Scott gave before creating Freddy's. It's really inspiring. But anyway, it was fun looking back at this game. It was nice trying to experience everything for the first time. I hope you enjoyed looking through this game as well. It was important, I think. The story and gameplay are so well known to old-time fans. I felt like going in with a critical eye. Taking things for granted might skew my opinion. Again, like the story. If you know Five Nights at Freddy's, you know how deep the story goes, that we almost assume how obvious it is in the first game, when it honestly couldn't be more hidden. This game means a lot to me. I don't want to turn this into a personal life story thing, but if I had a list of every game and their impact on me, Freddy's would probably be in like the top 3. Plus, I was really easily scared as a kid, but watching people play this game allowed me to get into horror, and understanding how a game can hide a deeper story within the game itself was super interesting. It's crazy how one piece of art can truly inspire others to want to do the same. But that's what this game did. I think of how open-ending it was, it really allowed people to take in any direction they wanted. I've been wanting to make a video like this for literally a few years at this point, so I knew if I was going to finally do it, I had to explain everything this game had, you know? It's one thing to just say you like a game, and that's fine. But here, I really wanted to explain why I like this game, why I think it's a good game, why is it so important to me. Get it all off my chest. It's funny in a way, I've not actually played a new Five Nights at Freddy's game in about 4 to 6 years. In fact, recently I was watching the second FNAF movie, which, opinions of the movie aside, I didn't think it really felt like Freddy's, you know? I was about halfway through making this video where, at least to me, it turned more into what is Freddy's, you know? And well, despite explaining it for about 2 hours, I still don't really know how to fully answer that. What is Five Nights at Freddy's? It's just the vibe of this game, you know? The simplicity of being in one location, the helplessness of not knowing what's in the dark, the mystery of not fully knowing what's going on, the noises you hear throughout the night, the sincere panic and quick reactions needed to survive, the charm of just one man trying his best, you know? When watching the trailers for the new games or movies, it just doesn't feel the same anymore, you know? Which makes sense. Spoiler alert, a lot of people are now working on these projects. It just doesn't feel like how FNAF used to feel, in my opinion. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if that's okay. Five Nights at Freddy's released in 2014, over 10 years ago now, and I'm not the same as who I was then. I used to be a quiet weirdo. Now I'm a noisy one, but I'm sure you've noticed. If I'm allowed to change, why can't the series I love? That part wasn't really important, I just wanted to explain my thought process in being a Freddy's fan. It's weird loving a series of games so much despite knowing that the series nowadays is nothing like how it used to be. I miss it, in a way. Going into Freddy's like it was new made me realise how long it's been since I've played a new Five Nights at Freddy's game. The game has such a distinct style that honestly, I don't think we will see a game like this, at least for a while. And maybe that's okay. As much as I want to be all grouchy like FNAF ain't the same as it used to be, that just makes the original games that much more special. And that's not a bad thing. I've rambled long enough. I like this game a whole lot, and saying it's inspired me in my art and storytelling would be a massive understatement. I love this game, and I love what it represents to me. By all means, I'd love to hear about what you like or don't like about the game. Feel free to tell me if I was wrong at any of my points, and I'll be more than happy to argue because you're wrong! Either way, folks, I hope you enjoyed this ramble. This is a new type of video for me, so if you have any feedback or anything, feel free to share it. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, or if you're off to sleep, have the sweetest of dreams. And I'll see you all in a bit. Toodaloo, thanks for listening to me talk about a game I love, and goodbye!